John Cleese, who's one of the original members of Monty Python, who's what I call one of the patron saints of comedy in my world anyway, has a saying that nothing opens up our minds faster than laughter. And he said it's a shortcut. It's nothing can get you to a closed mind, to an open mind faster than laughter.
Okay. 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, you know, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call, and let's see what holy trouble we get into today. So I am joined today by Ted Swartz, and I'm just going to let Ted introduce himself for this episode.
Okay, my name is Ted Swartz. I've been a writer and actor for about 30 years in various forms. And I started in sketch comedy work, and I've always been interested in what is funny. At 30 years old, I was encouraged by some members of the congregation that I was a part of to go to seminary. And I hadn't done college yet, so my wife and I took off, went to college, for me to go to college, and then seminary. And then when I was in seminary, I began to really fall in love with theater and aspects of theater that included a lot of comedy. So I started a company with a partner, Lee Eshelman. So we were Ted and Lee Comedy, etc. for a number of years. Lee passed away in 2007, so then the company became Ted and Company Theater Works. I am also starting a new position as the executive director of the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul. And I'm always interested in what makes us laugh and why. And it's interesting how much comedy and the understanding of humor develops as we age. Of course, things that we think are at 5 years old are funny. Sometimes are still funny when we're 30, but not as many.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the line, maybe we sort of hit a sweet spot in terms of where our sense of humor fits. What I think continues to grow is the understanding of the value of laughter and humor in our lives.
And and the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul just happens to be the sponsor of this podcast. So
wow, look at that. That's what a wonderful happy accident.
A happy accident. Yeah, you were saying how we often grow out of our humor. I joke that my spouse never grew out of the phase where you find poop jokes funny. He still thinks that it is top tier humor. And so, for better or worse.
I am not going to judge anyone's sense of humor when they reach a certain age.
Yeah.
Laughter and comedy has always been subjective and always will. So I don't want to impose my will on anyone. So.
But I do remember when you were at Heston College for a show, you did your show on I forget exactly what it was called. You can correct me, but it was what is humor? What was that show called?
It was a workshop that we did on, I did a number of shows during that time that I've been at Heston, different times. I did one called Laughter is Sacred Space, but that was a bit more of a story of my relationship with my partner, Lee, who passed away. But then I did a workshop with Jeff Rott on, what is funny? A workshop on why do we laugh? What makes us laugh? How does it fit within theology and biblical studies?
Right.
Where our faith and our humor intersect, if there is such a place, which there.
Yeah, that was the one.
That was the one? Okay.
I remember because you said that puns are the lowest form of humor. And afterwards, I met you. I think it was the first time I ever met you. And I chose that time, the first time of meeting Ted Swartz, to argue with you that lowest form of humor. And so today, because of that, I was thinking about what mug should I pick to talk about humor today? And so I decided to go with a mug that has a squirrel on it. It's gray with a little brown squirrel, and it says, "I'm nuts for coffee."
There you go. I'm not sure whose point is being made.
That's open to interpretation. Yeah, what are you drinking today?
Well, I have this. It's a frozen smoothie. So
Okay.
I make a huge batch and I drink one and then I freeze the rest. And this is a lot of fruit, mostly spinach. That's just the green color. So
maybe we'll have to put your green smoothie recipe in the comments under this video. You'll have to
that's a fun idea.
Hello, beloved baddies. A quick break to tell you that this episode is sponsored by the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul, a nonprofit that supports and amplifies the voices of edgewalkers through art that catalyzes change, laughter that brings us together, and soul awakening to the creative spark within us. The support from the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul has meant the world to this podcast. So I highly encourage you to check out their website, arthumorandsoul.com, to see their other featured artists and projects. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon or get in touch. Now I'll let you get back to this episode of Called to Be Bad. Yeah, so we're talking about comedy and theology, and we often start the podcast with definitions. And this is kind of, comedy is like a strange thing to define, but I thought it would be interesting since you did that whole workshop on like, what is humor?
Yeah.
You know, how do you define comedy? And also, how do you define theology? I always give people the easy questions here on this show, you know?
Right, yeah. So yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's no answers to those. So can we move on?
Yeah, next.
I read a book the other year called, I think it was called The Hidden Tools of Comedy. I do know the author's name is Steve Kaplan, with Kaplan. And he's a script doctor as part of his job to help make movies, specifically movie scripts, funnier. And he has a definition that I was very attracted to. And I think I used it in that workshop that we were both at. And that is, comedy is about an ordinary person struggling against insurmountable odds without many of the tools with which to win, yet never giving up hope.
Huh.
So it's a little different. So if you think about that, and he gives examples of movies that many of us might have seen, is that comedy often happens when we see someone in, what's the crisis? What problem do they have? Because nobody wants to watch a show without conflict or a dilemma or something an obstacle to surmount. Mm-hmm. And playwrights and script writers of any kind are trying to think about, how can we raise the stakes here? How can we give the characters obstacles that they have to figure out how to overcome? And the key for Kaplan is, without many of the tools, in other words, they're stuck in a situation that seems impossible. They can't figure it out, but they don't lose hope. And it's the don't losing hope for Kaplan that's the key. Now, that's not the drive of the dialogue of a character, perhaps, but it's the ethos inside that drives them forward. One of the examples might be, Lee and I wrote a show many years ago called Fish Eyes, which is the story of two of the first disciples of Jesus. And it was that show that pushed us out into our larger audiences that we've ever had. And it seemed to captivate a lot of people because it was different. One of the things that we did, which was key, we thought, was we were first of all going to look what's funny in the existing story. And we weren't going to make fun of it. We were going to layer the humor in a different place. And so we tried to create believable human characters. And the key there is human, because too much of biblical drama is scared to death to make people actually be human. Right about the time that seemed to be changing in churches across North America, the whole church drama movement dried up for various reasons, one of which was video. And it's just really hard to do well, but that's a whole other subject. But what we did is we tried to find what was inherent in the story itself. And we also did not understand what was going on. So another pitfall to write biblical theater, comedy, or drama is to write a 2,000-year-old understanding of a situation, because you want to make sure that your audience understands and gets the reason for it. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you write, the disciples, Peter and Andrew, for instance, with an understanding of who this person was at a deeper place. And there's much more theater possible, and there's much more comedy possible if they don't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
But there's something that gives them hope to continue. And it's that hope to continue is that this person who is a charismatic leader, teacher, storyteller in a way that they've never seen before. So coming back to Kaplan's original idea, I thought, it's a pretty good life philosophy. Two people stuck, or people stuck in an untenable position without the prerequisite tools to survive without giving up hope. That's kind of how we do life.
I was going to say that basically is the definition of like what life is.
Yeah, there you go.
Give or take on the giving up hope part a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyways, do you want to, like, with your, I found your definitions of humor, or like the different categories of what is humor. I found that really interesting in your presentation. Do you want to go through those real fast?
Yes, we laugh for many different reasons. One is that we see ourselves, we recognize ourselves. And so there's a sense of commonality. Oh, I do that too. Yes, I can relate to that. That feels very familiar. So we laugh. And it's a way of connecting to what we're seeing or what we're hearing. So that's one of the pieces. When we see truth and it's connected to, again, we recognize ourselves, that can be a real aha moment that often produces surprise. We can simply be delighted. That's just a lovely word, is delight. What does it mean to be delighted? I don't know the etymology to break it down, but, or is it etymology? One is bugs and one is words.
Yeah. I don't know.
So the study of words, whichever one that is.
Yeah.
I think someone should write a book called The Etymology of Etymology, which would be the study of how we name bugs.
Yeah.
So.
I think I would read that book.
Yeah, I think so too. So delight, I'm not sure what it exactly means, but you cannot you cannot help but feel lighter.
Yeah.
And feel like there's a smile that's going to happen with that when you're delighted.
When you said delight, and that brings out humor, it reminded me of when my nephew Eli met his baby brother Toby. He walked in the room and saw Yasi, my sister-in-law, holding Toby. And he just like burst out with the cutest laughter that I've ever heard in my entire life. And I feel like that was just laughter of pure delight of seeing this baby that he's been waiting for, his baby brother. Anyway,
that's perfect. That's perfect. And that's even better that it's a child, because oftentimes children can delight us so that we do laugh, but it's even better to have a toddler see that and express it in that way, because he's got a limited vocabulary.
Right.
But that one is sort of like, okay, what fits here? Crying, no, that doesn't fit. Tantrums don't fit. I can't write a soliloquy. So what's left? Oh, I think laughter is a good spot here. So
it was so cute. Yeah,
that's great. Then I think the last one you've already mentioned is surprise. We laugh when we're surprised. And if we can be delighted and we can be surprised and we can see ourselves, that's a pretty good sandwich. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be, it's almost a guarantee that you're going to get laughter in a situation for that. And I've discovered a new one, and I think I talked about it in that session, was that there are studies that anthropologists are doing about the conversation and the language of the great apes. Mm. And that sound that we often equate with those primates, and it sounds a bit like hoo, 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 hoo. And by the way, I love imitating animals. We could do this for a while if you want, but that sound of hoo, hoo is the beginning, in terms of some anthropologists are saying, it's the beginning of our laughter. Mm. So that sound that we would have made, and what they're signaling is, you're safe. Mm-hmm. I'm not a danger to you. I'm not going to hurt you. So that laughter is a way to say, you are safe here. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's just going to, if you think about it, if you're in a room and you feel comfortable enough to laugh, unless it's built out of a nervous tension, you already feel safe. Right. So it's just an acknowledgement.
Gosh, I'm sorry. I'm just getting so excited thinking about this. I keep trying to interrupt you, but I was thinking it was making me think of the second part that you were talking about, the laughter out of nerves. how we laugh to like smooth out social situations.
Yeah.
We're laughing to say, yes, this is uncomfortable, and we're trying to make it safe because if something feels unsafe. Or I was thinking about how women often when they're feeling threatened by often a man, they will laugh at things that aren't funny in order to remain safe.
Yes.
Get out of a situation. And it's like very, like, I feel like I can recognize when they're like, it's not funny, but they're laughing because they're uncomfortable.
Right.
That's a whole other aspect of humor. I mean, I guess it's not even true humor, but.
Yeah, it's a little different. I think that's a sort of the study of laughter and why we laughed. And that goes a little bit deeper into some of those things that you're talking about. It's that, when there's threat, it can be a way to diffuse. It can be a way to diffuse a tension in a room, which is a little different than what you're talking about. Which, if there's a threat, and it's there's some new language around the brain responses to trauma and danger, the fight, flight, or freeze. And there's an addition that many people are starting to use, which is fawn.
Yes.
And I think that laughter is a part of the fawning of trying to overdo something to make sure the other person feels powerful, comfortable, acquiescing to the other person, so you can eliminate some sort of trauma. And laughter can do that too.
Laughter as trauma response. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess I realized we never defined theology, and I want to kind of dive into like the intersections between comedy and theology. Yeah.
Theology is, in its definition, that most people understand it, is, well, I guess it means the study of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Theology.
I always think of it like the easy way I describe it is God talk.
Okay.
Word God.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. I think for me, maybe in relating to this conversation, it's how do we understand the divine?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if you're saying if you broaden it to that point, you open up a whole other potential and possibility for an understanding of a whole lot of things, rather than the narrow view of God that many of us grew up with. Mm-hmm. And that maybe we had to go through a process of development for that. So for me, it's how do we find the divine, and how do we, I'm not going to be any better at defining what divine means than right. comedy, but to touch something that feels greater than you, mm-hmm. That feels like there is a reason we're here. Mm-hmm. So the way that comedy fits that for me is that when we are in a room full of consensual laughter together, that feels pretty divine to me. Mm. And it's sometimes related to the material that we're doing. If you're doing a show that is explicitly about a faith experience, that could, comedy can enhance that. Oftentimes it's done without comedy, and I think there's something missing. And when I say comedy, it's mostly what makes us laugh or touches that. So that's what it is for me at the moment. It's an exploration and an awareness, not a study of, but an awareness of how there are many ways to connect to the divine. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. I remember in your talk, you were describing how humor like opens the door to further connection. And it creates this like sense of permission to go deeper. Yeah. That has always stuck with me. And so there's something there about like how humor gets us closer to one another. And so how does that interact with like us getting closer to something greater than ourselves? Like I think both comedy and theology kind of draw us deeper or something. And yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I was thinking about it this morning, is that for so many years and generations, I think within a faith concept, comedy and laughter would take us to, quote, the meaning. Mm. And I think we missed an important step, which is sometimes that moment of laughter is the meaning.
Ah, okay.
So that because I've told a humorous story, now I've got to give a moral to that story. Or can we just tell the story?
Mm-hmm.
If that story is humorous, we're already connected to it. That's the power of story overall, whether it's humorous or not. That's a whole other conversation to have sometime, is the power of narrative and the power of story, and how that we're predisposed to connect to story in a way that we are not predisposed to connect to concepts, I don't think. John Cleese, who's one of the original members of Monty Python, who's what I call one of the patron saints of comedy in my world anyway, has a saying that nothing opens up our minds faster than laughter. And he said it's a shortcut. It's nothing can get you to a closed mind, to an open mind faster than laughter.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a little bit, if a room full of people are laughing together, they are open for the opportunity for something deeper. Now, sometimes that laughter is the deepness that the moment deserves. But I think a lot of good work, and some of the work that we're working on right now at the center, is about creating performances that hold a lot of laughter. And they may be called comedies or not, but if you bring people to a point where they're laughing together and breathing together, and then you can present to them another moment, it's going to hit a lot harder. It's going to hit deeper. It connects you in a way that almost nothing else does. So maybe the way that I define theology and the divine and how they fit together is maybe laughter helps us open ourselves and others to the possibility of letting something else in that may be mysterious. It may be a deeper truth. So there were people that were writing sketches for churches to do back in the 90s and 2000s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. There was a movement to bring church drama into services. And first of all, it's really hard to do on a consistent basis, to get the right people there, to have the right amount of rehearsals. But there were some larger churches that were doing it pretty well. But they had, not in all cases, but for a while it felt like that they were writing what we called slice of life scenarios. Something that happens to us every day, and the congregation can relate to it. And then they would try to find where the divine connection was to that. How do you make it mean something? How does it and it was in service of, quote, the message. So how do we bring people ready to hear a different kind of message rather than have the sketch be the message itself? And so you're starting with a human story, and then you try and bring the divine into it. So for Lee and I, or the sacred into that moment. So Lee and I, we would say, well, we start with the sacred story first. We start with a biblical story, or, quote, a story of the divine, and then we insert the humanity, because we know how to do that inherently, because we're humans. It's really hard for us to say, I'm going to create a human story and insert the divine. The equation isn't perfect, but it's a way to flip that so that and comedy was a way to bring the human in. Laughter is a way to bring the human in. And it was the fastest way, as I said before, to bring that understanding, so that when we're creating a story with the biblical, with the disciples, the first disciples of Jesus in it, and we create a sketch where Jesus says something that they just don't understand. So they try to make up what the possible scenarios would be, and you have the possibility of comedy. When Jesus says, you give them something to eat, and they go out looking for food, because what else are they going to do? They don't have the tools to do so in here, but they don't lose hope. They actually go out and look for food. And so, what does it mean? So one of my favorite lines in that early stuff, which is, so they come back and they have 12 baskets of leftovers. And Jesus says, what does it mean? And the disciples say, why does he keep doing that to us? What does it mean? Why can't 12 just be 12? Does everything have to be a teachable moment? So they make up the possibilities. So it could be this, it could be that, it could be that. And it's not, so they go up and they say, they say to each other, well, we'll just go with the usual. We'll just give them the usual. And they walk up to Jesus and say, we don't know. Which is because we don't know so much of that. So it was a great laugh line because it was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And it also was, oh my God, these people might actually be humans like us.
Yeah.
So, and your husband would be happy to learn, your partner would be happy to learn that, you know, they actually, you know, pooped a lot too, because, you know, a lot of roughage and exercise. So they did that too as humans.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and
somewhere there's a relic, somewhere in Rome that will bear out what I just said.
A poop relic. Yeah, and I think that one thing that I love about your shows is that it points out how naturally funny the Bible is. Like some of it, I feel like you don't even, not to like discount your work, your hard work that you put into it, but I feel like
there's no work in that at all. It's just it's inherent, right? Yeah.
You need to try like Jonah, I think was written actually as like satire, but we don't always catch that because I think that we have equated the Bible and the holy and religious as something serious. And so when it was originally written to be humor or point out irony, we miss it because we're like, oh no, it can't be funny.
Right.
And the same thing with Jesus. Like I think Jesus said a lot of things that were supposed to be maybe not funny, but yeah, humorous, ironic, and like. And once we tap into that, I think we can get to a deeper meaning. I just preached a sermon on when Jesus tamed the storm, and I was pointing out how, like, Jesus said to the disciples, like, "Why are you afraid?" In a moment, very reasonable to be terrified. Like they're human.
Yeah.
No, when storms are dangerous. And then he's like sleeping in the boat, and they're like, "Do you not care that we're gonna perish?" And Jesus is like, "Whoa, chill. Like, why are you scared right now?" And they're like, "The boat is falling apart. Right. Why wouldn't we be scared?" And so I just, I love that. I love that element that when you point out the humor in the Bible, it realizes like, okay, humor can be holy, and it can be meaningful, and there is divinity there. So I really appreciate that work.
Good. I think, that's meaningful. Thanks. There's years ago, someone said to Lee and I that what we were doing was a form of midrash. And I don't want to borrow too much from other traditions, but the Hebrew and Jewish tradition does a better job of doing what you're saying, I think. Because midrash, we didn't understand the term at the time. And he explained it to us that some rabbis used it in a way to say, there's black fire in this experience, and those are the words on the page. There's a white fire, and that's in the spaces between the words on the page. So what's between the words on the page? And for us, we would say, okay, here's the story. It's 6 verses long. We're going to create a 10-minute sketch out of those 6 verses. And where that's going to come from is there's a whole human story in between.
Right.
And so you just described where the human story is in the in-between, which is, so we jump from, there's a storm, Jesus performs miracles. So he says in some sort of sanctimonious voice, "Why are you afraid? Because you should know I am the Son of God and I can take care of this." No, there's a whole story you're missing that connects us to it in a different way. And it allows us, in the way that you just described, to be scared, to be confused, to be pissed at God, at, all the ways that allow us to be human so that we're not constrained by what we think our faith is boxing us into. We spend an awful lot of time sort of explaining ourselves at different times, but the actual process of finding what was funny in a story came pretty fast.
Yeah.
When you start with what you don't know. And I'm not the world's biggest expert on this, but when you start with curiosity and what you don't know, you can learn an awful lot, and you're going to find art in ways you don't expect. One of my favorite stories is the healing of the paralytic from when it was brought to Jesus, and it's a wonderfully constructed comedy story, because first of all, Jesus is at a place a place of rest, and so he's there to rest. He's there to refuel, and a whole bunch of people show up. And in my scenario, he doesn't want them there. And then they crowd in, and and in the front are the teachers of the law and hecklers. They're the ones in the front. The hecklers are in the front, and they're there to catch him up on a mistake. And he knows why they're there. And they're the well-you-know guys. Are you familiar with that term?
Well, is this like kind of like a mansplaining type of?
Like
if I ever start a sentence with "actually," I know I'm in trouble.
Well, it's a different form. Yeah, it's a different form. So when we were doing workshops to try to find where the humor is, groups of people to help them get a deeper understanding where there might be another story, there was always a guy who would say, well, in those days, their nets would have been made of this, and they couldn't have done that. And I call that pissing on the holy fire. So my admonition is, don't let the guys piss on your fire. Holy fire. So in this scenario, so it's crowded there, and these 4 friends of this man who's been paralyzed try to find their way, and they can't get there. So they go up on the roof, and certain texts say it better than others, but it basically says they dug through the roof. Mm-hmm. And I was a kid, I thought everybody had removable panels up there, because you wouldn't have anything as messy as digging through the roof. So in the scenario that I was imagining is that this group of people are all gathered around. Jesus is irritable. Shit starts to fall down on them. So now they all look up, and the roof's coming in. Mm. And then down comes the pallet that they're lowered on. And the scenario would be, does this guy want to be there in this position, in this spot?
All eyes on him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So if you're creating a sketch, you say, does he want to be there? The right answer is, what's most interesting
is that
or what's fun. Oh, no, he doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
It gives them a whole running dialogue, right? Yeah. So if I could, so he gets down there, and then Jesus, and this is the reason I tell the story, is that in my imagination, Jesus just starts laughing.
Yeah.
Just starts laughing, because, oh my gosh, it's delight, it's surprise, I just want these people out of my hair, and I got to deal with them. And now we've got this happening, which is, oh, what a wonderful little break we have here. So I think it comes back to the fact that what you're saying is very, very true. I mean, there's humor. We try to find it everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's astounding to me that we don't honor it as one of the more profound gifts that we've been given.
Yeah.
We just put it down on the second shelf. In reality, it's what gives us hope to be alive.
Yeah, I like that, because I as a person, it comes naturally to me to look for beauty in things.
Yeah.
And that is one of the ways that I connect with God, with the divine. Are you doing that to show your nail polish?
No. I'm saying you're a 4. Of course you would.
4. Yeah, fair. I thought you were saying, look at my beautiful nails. Ted, listening, Ted has his nails painted, and so I thought you were showing off your beautiful nails.
just 2 on each hand.
Just 2, yeah. And anyways, so I look for beauty, and that's one of the ways that I see and feel divinity is finding beauty in things.
Yes.
So I often incorporate that into my sermons. And so I hadn't thought about how humor can be kind of what you're saying, like a vehicle to or for the divine. And so what are ways that you look for humor or experience humor? And because I'm always saying, like, you know, God is present, is near. You just have to like open yourself up to seeing it. And for me, it's like looking at beauty, looking at nature, and that's where I feel closest to God. So doing that same thing with humor, I love that, because again, we were talking about like how humor has kind of been denigrated, and it like doesn't have a place in church. It doesn't have a place in faith, but it so does. I like that. Well, I'm curious, how would you respond if someone called you a bad Christian or bad ministering person or comedian for doing the work you do? Hopefully, they don't call you a bad comedian, but you get the
Yeah, see, that's worse. That's the thing. Isn't that something? Yeah, I don't mind being called a bad Christian. If someone calls me a bad Christian, that probably means I'm doing something authentic in the way that I believe it should be. For many of us who are in the performing arts in a way and using humor in that way, for us to be called out on something, it was a badge of honor.
Right, and it's more material that you could use.
Right, absolutely. Oh, I put some of those into a book. I put a list of complaints that people had. I didn't mention any names, but one of my favorite moments was Lee and I had a sketch on the Song of Solomon, which I think is one of the better pieces we've ever written from a comedic standpoint. And the basic scenario is Lee's playing Solomon, and he's quote writing in his book, and he's actually creating the Proverbs. And so he's reading them out, and he gets to a point where he says, God helps them that help. Nah, he scribbles it out. So I run in and I say, Solomon, I've got a problem. I'm trying to woo this young woman, and I've been trying to write her some stuff, and I got nothing. You got to come help me do this. So he finally convinces Solomon to come, and basically do the Cyrano de Bergerac version of the Song of Solomon, which is he's hiding in the bushes, giving me the lines as I woo this woman. And your cheeks are like the two halves of a pomegranate. So a what? A pomegranate? I can't say that. So, and then it's the sheep, and he said, is everything going to be livestock? So someone wrote into the host that time and said that, they were appalled at all of this. And, they were terrified that we were going to mention breasts. I think that's part of it. And then they said, is this, I've heard sermons that this is an allegory for how Jesus loves the church, that this is the way we do it. So like, if that's where you are, I'm happy to be a bad Christian, because that's such a horrifically convoluted way to interpret an astoundingly lustful, wonderful letter. Right. So anyway,
all the spice from the Bible, they're like, no, I would like the bland version instead. Well, final question. Do you have any advice for someone navigating comedy or the intersections of comedy and theology, and any resources to share? So we can like link the book that you mentioned down below or anything else. Read those, but yeah.
I think I've come to a much deeper understanding of, as I said, comedy and theology don't have to be different things. They can both be broadened. Our perspectives can be broadened. Like a comedian is not a stand-up comic in the same way that theology isn't simply, getting advanced Greek down so you can interpret the original text from the New Testament. I think broadening your concepts of what both of them are, you start to then begin to blend them together in a way that you don't see one or the other. They are a piece and a part of who we are all the time. That's one way to look at it. Advice for people who are thinking about performance as a life. It's really hard and really rewarding. And I wouldn't have wanted to do anything else. We all make mistakes along the way. I wish I knew a whole lot more when I started than I did. If I did, I might not have started.
Yeah, fair.
Because I had what I called naive persistence is what I called it.
Yeah.
Which is, I didn't know any better, so we kept going.
Hey, that's like the whole comedy thing.
There you go. Yes, it is. Look at that.
Tools, but you keep going. So
that's right. Oh my gosh. What a really interesting little loop connection you just made there. I got full circle.
Love it. Well, I've started calling our listeners baddies. So
sweet.
So is it okay if I bless you and all the baddies that are listening or watching?
Please do.
Okay. Ted and all of you baddies, may you go from this space with a new understanding of where comedy and divinity kiss. May you pursue laughter and irony and all of the bad puns. Yeah, go in. I often say go in peace, but I'll say go in laughter today.
Go in laughter. Sometimes it's a chuckle, and that's okay.
Yeah, go with a giggle.
Go with the.
I like that.
Thank you. That's marvelous.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on, Ted. It was great having you.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Maura.
That's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.